I start with you, Mr. Zakim? The pictures are getting ghastlier by the minute. By the minute. We have started seeing public executions. All we are hearing from America constantly is we are trying to get back as many Americans as possible. But not one word on what the Taliban has unleashed. Even your media has gone silent. The situation is terrible. Today they've said no Afghan will ever be allowed to leave the country. And you know what happened in Kandahar. Former Afghan commanders were dragged to a stadium and publicly executed. And this is only the start. How can America stop taking responsibility when it has entered into this partnership with the Taliban?
Well, let me begin by saying that nothing that you have shown and talked about is something that I didn't know because, and I'm no fan of the media. I think a lot of our media are, well, let me just say I don't entirely agree with them, but this has all been reported. So that's number one. I think number two, to say that America is not pulling Afghans out is totally inaccurate. I'm personally involved in pulling Afghans out, and we have gotten them out. There are tons of them, literally hundreds of them, and they keep coming into Doha to the American air base at Al Udeid. Does that mean that we should have had a deadline of August 31st? Personally, no. I don't agree with that. I didn't agree with the deal. Does that mean that we shouldn't extend the deadline? Personally, I think we should extend the deadline. But I think hyperbole does not help. Once we get as many people out as we can, both Americans and Afghans and third country people, then we start looking at what are we dealing with here? It just seems to me that posturing, which is what you have done, sir, is not helping anybody. What is India going to be doing? I worked with India when I was undersecretary, and I helped India get its initial two consulates in Afghanistan because I thought it was terribly important that India have a relationship with Afghanistan. Taliban doesn't want you. We know that. But don't start pointing fingers at us until we know what happens after we've got people out. And I think that it's a huge mistake for a country that we're actually quite close with, namely India, to have this kind of vituperative attacks. This was not the greatest betrayal in history. Ask the Czechs in 1938, sir. This was not the greatest. Was it a mistake? I agree. But for God's sake, let's focus on getting people out before
Mr. Zakim, I've heard your
hyperbole.
Yeah, I hear your perspective. You completely wrongly accuse me of posturing. I will equally tell you that you must be brave to look at the facts. And I blame you, not you personally. I blame your country, the United States of America, for the situation today where in Herat, any woman, any young girl over the age of 15 is pulled out to be a sexual slave to the Taliban, right? Any woman, any widow below the age of 40 is pulled into the sexual slavery of the Taliban. I blame you, sir. What you're saying is the same old technical argument about whether 31st was a right or wrong date. The world is not interested in your technicality. The world wants to know whether you take any responsibility for what the Afghan people are going through. What you are saying is, we are not taking responsibility. You point the finger at my country, India. Well, let me tell you, we are not ever saying to the rest of the world, we are the saviors of the world. It's America which says, we are the saviors of the world. So the onus is on you, and that is why this is the world's greatest betrayal. Maybe you should hear, and one more thing about culpability. Culpability is also moral. Think of your moral culpability. Please understand, India has had the closest relationship with Afghanistan since the early 80s. So it is wrong to say that America was solely responsible in facilitating a diplomatic relationship with Afghanistan. No, sir, don't think you're so important. You don't need to do that.
I never said.
No,
Hold
you
on.
you indicated that.
You're putting words
What
in
I'm
my
asking
mouth.
you,
Number
what I'm
one.
asking you, and what I'm asking you is simply this. To what is happening to the Afghan people, what is your responsibility? What is your responsibility when the police chief who worked for you, who served under you, a man you knew, you cultivated, is held, his hands held behind his back? Have you seen the shot of how he was killed? Point blank, his lifeless body, bullets pumped in by these savages. What you're saying is, what you're saying is, that's not my problem, it never was. You're saying that's not my problem, it never was.
Don't tell me what I'm saying until you hear me. Now listen here. You asked me to be on your show, then let me speak.
Don't get aggressive with me, sir. Don't get aggressive. Listen to the other side. Be tolerant to criticism. Don't get touchy with me. Don't get touchy with me. I am asking you, I asked you on my show. I asked you on my show, and I know that you ought to. You ought to take. I asked you on my show, but I don't want you to be touchy with me. I don't want you to point the finger at me.
You're not letting me speak. Will you please let?
I am only asking you face to face. I'm showing you a mirror tonight. You're not being able to face it.
Excuse me, you won't let me speak. If you will let me speak, then I will answer you. I will tell you again, I do not agree with what we did. Personally, I don't. Secondly, right now, the issue is simply to avoid more of the kind of killings that you've talked about. And that is to get as many people out as we can. That's not a technicality. It's certainly not a technicality for the people at the airport and for the people who are trying to get into the airport. Once that is done, for better or for worse, then we can evaluate. Then you can try pointing fingers. Then there's much to say.
Mr. Zakim,
but not right
Mr.
now.
Zakim, let me tell you one thing. I'll get in here the other perspective tonight.